down in my heart. Deep, deep, and it's a down, down, deep down in my heart. Deep, deep, and it's a down, down, deep down in my heart.
Good morning. Be seated. Yesterday I was talking with a couple of my friends and mentioned the fact that we had Jeff Walling coming this morning. And they quickly said, that'll be a nice break. Wasn't sure if they were referring to me or to them. I'm not really clear. It is indeed a privilege to have Jeff with us this morning. I think the first time I heard Jeff speak, I was 13 and a very young teenager, and he was a very, old, one of those old guys. I think he was 17 or something like that. I just want to make sure you know he's a lot older than I am. And but he was telling us all about this cutting-edge new ministry that was sweeping our brotherhood, the Joy Bus ministry. And sure enough, he got all of our folks at College Church of Christ in Fresno excited. We went back and we bought 6 buses, had a big congregation, except we had this sort of anti-establishment deacon who did not want to go with the traditional yellow and brown striped scheme. He wanted a color that was readily recognizable, extremely unique, and that everyone would know that was the College Church of Christ Joy Buses. And so he painted them Pepto-Bismol pink. So here I was, a young and up-and-coming minister in the Joy Bus ministry in the 70s, trying very hard to be cool, riding a pink Joy Bus every Sunday morning. As is probably obvious, I still haven't recovered from the trauma of all of that. And I remembered, and I had Jeff Walling to thank for that. But it is indeed a privilege to have him here this morning. Anyone who's heard him speak before, I'm sure you're excited. And if you haven't heard him, well, you're in for a real great time this morning. We want to welcome our brother Jeff. His wife Catherine is with us as well, and it's good to have them here.
It is a treat to be here with you, and I remember that differently. Dan, I remember being a young person when you were speaking there at college, and it was about 6th grade, and I think you were probably 30, and if you are a guest like me, I hope you've already discovered a couple of things that's really evident about this church. I hope you've already seen that the folks here really do believe that Jesus is worth singing and praising and smiling about. And if you are looking for a church home, maybe you have just stumbled into the right place today. My wife and I are thrilled to be here for a number of reasons. To get a chance to see good friends as we walked in and people began to say hello, just how much memory and how many relationships were here. Of course, Bill Henniger, way back when I was about 8 or 9 or 10 years old, we went to the Downey Church of Christ together. And sitting right behind them are some good folks, Mark and Sandy, who opened their home to our son when he moved out here to California, preceding us actually to work for the church here in the valley. And they were so gracious and welcoming, and it made us feel so good to know there were Christian families here that would kind of keep an eye on him, and we'll always be thankful for that. Right now I'm working with Zach Lubin, the youth minister from Culver Palms, on a wonderful project called Crossways. And it just happens that Christy's parents, his wife's, attend right here. And her dad was reminding me that we went to Tonda Bible Camp about 2 million years ago, I think, up in Camp Tonda. So it's just great to be here where there are so many good memories. I do, and I'm still getting used to saying, bring you greetings from Pepperdine University. It's been a year and a half now or so since my wife and I made the move from Charlotte, North Carolina, back to our native California. And what a blessing it is to be able to work with Pepperdine. Normally, on these Sundays that we have called in past Christian Education Sundays, I would say, now, how many of you know where Pepperdine is? But I'm betting the answer would be pretty high here in this group, seeing as we're just across the valley from you over in Malibu. In about a month, well, really, in about 4 weeks, there will be 800 young students who will graduate, some with graduate degrees, some with undergraduate degrees, and Pepperdine's school year will finish. But that leads right into one of the most exciting times for me on campus, when thousands of Christians from all across the country will come to Malibu and enjoy a week at the Pepperdine Bible Lectures. This year, our theme is cruciformed. In fact, let's see, they gave me this button, which probably means do it yourself. Let's see. Hey, it does. All right, that's awesome. This year, our opening night speaker is N.T. Wright, a wonderful scholar and teacher from England who will be with us. We will also, let's see, and I'm going to back that up because we're not there yet. We'll also get a chance to enjoy a little bit of history. I just think Mike Cope has done a great job of bringing in speakers from the Churches of Christ as well as other groups all across the country. But this year, he brought in someone that I have seen in pictures all my life and can't wait to hear her story. If I tell you the picture, you'll immediately probably get that mental image. It is a Norman Rockwell painting of a young African-American girl who probably is maybe 7. She's got a beautiful yellow dress on. She's got her school books under her arm. She's got her little black patent leather shoes, and she's all dressed up. It looks like she could be going to church, but she's going to school. But walking in front of her are 2 federal marshals, and walking behind her are 2 federal marshals. And on the wall, the brick wall behind her in this painting, is an awful epithet. And as she walks with that in the background, you remember that this is Ruby Bridges, the young lady who was one of the very first integrated students. And I want to say it was Alabama, but somebody will correct me later if I'm wrong, and it was Mississippi. But the story is one that galvanized America as finally the sin of racism was broken, and when our country said, this is just wrong. What I did not know about that sweet little girl was that as she was walking, she was doing something her parents, her mom, had taught her to do. Because Ruby's mom told her that when you go to that school today, there'll be some people that will hate you. There'll be some people that'll holler at you. Some may call you names. And she said, sweetheart, here's what you do. As you walk, you just say, Father, forgive them, for they, anybody know the rest of that? Know not what they do. That faith has sustained Ruby Bridges until now, of course, she's a grown woman who has been speaking all over the country, promoting Christian love, Christian unity, and diversity in God's kingdom. I look forward to being able to hear Ruby Bridges present at the Pepperdine Bible Lectures. How many have ever been over to the lectures? I'm just curious. Great. All right. Good. And how many won't raise your hand no matter what question I ask you? Just so we know. Thank you. There's always some. If you have not been, the good news is the lectures are the best buy in town. It would cost you more for you and your wife to go to a movie here in Simi Valley than it would for you to spend a whole week, 4 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at the Pepperdine Bible Lectures. This year it is a $20 admission for the whole week. And if that is a problem for you, just come anyway. And you can just tell them I said so, because we want you to come and enjoy it. Now, for those of you who think, well, man, it's a long way, Jeff, to drive from here all the way over to Malibu, I don't blame you. My wife and I drove that 47 minutes this morning. So just in case you say, well, it's a long way, 47 minutes isn't bad, but how about this? How about you just drive over on Tuesday and stay the week? We empty out the dorms, we clean them up and get them ready for you, and for about $150, you can stay all 4 nights. I don't mean per night, I mean total, all 4 nights. It's a gift from Pepperdine University, and we hope that you'll come and just enjoy all 4 days, or if you can just come over for 1 or 2 days, get online at pepperdine.edu and you can see the schedule there. I am thankful to be able to speak a moment about the importance of Christian education, but I do not simply mean higher education. What was happening right here this morning when those wonderful kids were up here singing and praising, that's Christian education. What's happening in the Bible classes before church began, what's happening right now. And I was so sad to see the kids go, I have to say. I love that spirit. All of that is about raising up the next generation. But we live in a world in which the next generation faces so much focus from media, advertisement, to pull them in any other direction. What will it take? What does it take to stay on mission every day? What will it take for those young people who were standing up here a moment ago to be still praising God on Sunday mornings 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or 30 from now? Well, may I offer you a biblical answer this morning? If you have your Bibles with you, open up to Hebrews chapter 11, and we're going to start there in a study from this wonderful chapter, but we're just really going to focus on one verse. But I need to set it up for you with this picture. This is the Long Beach Marathon. Actually, I don't know if they did they did a half and a full, didn't they, sweetie? The Long Beach, I may have not turned this unit here on. Is it? Now it is. All right, good deal. Okay, we'll do that. Marathon running is an intelligence test. At least I think so. Well, at least I did think so. 26.2 miles. Those are the kind of distance that God invented cars for. And so when I see a crowd like this heading out to run that kind of distance, years ago I would have said, that's nuts, but I can't say that anymore. Because the beautiful lady that God led into my life, my wife, is a marathon runner. She's run about 12 of them, including the Boston Marathon and the Marine Corps Marathon and the San Diego Marathon. In fact, I still remember the first marathon my wife ever ran. And let me say right now, she is saying, honey, I've told you not to tell these stories. So don't look over at her, because that just makes her nervous. She told me, I remember this years ago, said, you know what, I want to run the San Diego Marathon with my two brothers in honor of my oldest brother, and he'd passed away. And I said, well, sweetheart, if you want to do that, what can I do? She said, well, is it okay? It's going to take some time and training. And I said, sure. So the word began to spread in the church where we preached that the preacher's wife was going to run a marathon. Oh, and some who had run it were coming up and saying, well done. And others were saying, man, that's amazing. People were coming up to me and saying, are you going to do it too? And I said, no. Somebody has to be there to give them the water and say, go, So that was my role. So we went down to San Diego, and I'm telling you, it was a crowd like that at the start. There were something like 40,000 people that were going to run that marathon. It's huge. It's called the Rock and Roll Marathon, and every mile there's a different rock and roll, well, not even rock and roll band, all kinds of bands. There were bluegrass bands and marching bands to keep everybody's spirits up as they ran the 26.2 miles. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. Bill, I felt like I was at the Olympics. I mean, the start of it, they had the Star-Spangled Banner sung, and all these people were just so excited. And man, when they took off, boy, the crowd went nuts. And we kind of followed them along, well, not the 26.2 miles, but we'd catch them here. And then my sister-in-law was with me, whose husband, my wife's twin brother, was running. We'd catch them here and there, but it was when we got to the end that I got hooked. They'd set up bleachers. And there were several thousand people just in the bleachers. And as they came down that last part of the way, now it doesn't look like that at the end of the marathon. At the end of the marathon, it thins out just a little bit, even as it did here in Long Beach. And by the end of the marathon, some folks are dragging. I mean, just kind of, barely making it. I was so proud. We were there screaming and yelling as my wife, with head held high, finished her first marathon. I ran around and hugged her neck, and then we all went to lunch together and celebrated, and we were driving home. We lived down in Mission Viejo at that point, and as we were driving home, I said to her, babe, that was the most exciting thing maybe I've ever seen. Do you think I could do something like that? And my wife lied to me. She said, why, sure, sweetheart. That week we went and bought some new tennis shoes, and I got a running shirt and running shorts. I looked like I was going fast just standing still. I mean, I was ready for it. That Wednesday night, we no longer had Wednesday night services, had small groups instead, and so on. That Wednesday night, we went to the YMCA track. Now, this is a third of a mile track. And she said, now, if we go 3 times around this, that's 1 mile. And I thought, okay, I've got the math on this. I'm ready to go. And I'm thinking, 1 mile, let's do 3. Let's do 6 tonight. She said, babe, take it easy now. But I was full of, spit and vinegar, and here we go. I'm ready. Let's do it. So she hit the little watch timer, and boom, we took off. And I have to say, it felt great. I mean, for the first 20 seconds or so, it was exhilarating. And then my body started saying, who do you think you are? And what do you think you're doing? And by the time I'd made it one whole way, did I say that's 1/3 of a mile? One whole way around that track. I had to kind of stop and slow down. And Catherine said, what's wrong? And I said, hush up. Oh, I was frustrated. Another 1/3 of a mile, still another 1/3 of a mile. And I thought, this is the dumbest thing I have ever done. By the time we got in the car, I was cranky and irritated and said to her, why do you do this? That's just, I calculated how many times we'd have to go around that little thing to get the 26.2 in. And I said, how do you do it? And she gave me the best answer in the world. She said, honey, you don't run 26.2 miles. You just run 1 more step. Just 1 more step. Or as sometimes in AA they say, 1 step what? At a time. It's good advice. Because you see, unless I am aware that I just need to take the next right step. But the problem with that advice is that when I run, I have a tendency to look down. I have a tendency just to kind of shuffle along like this. And yes, her example has spurred me on. We've done, I guess I've done 4 or 5 half marathons, which is 13.1 mile, which in many ways is harder than a full marathon to stop at that halfway point. You just, you kind of have to pull up short. But she will often tell me, honey, pick up your head. Now, so here's 2 contrasting thoughts, right? Just 1 step at a time, but pick up your head. 1 step at a time, but pick up your head. Can I tell you that's a biblical principle? Hebrews chapter 11 is the story of people who took life 1 step at a time, but they kept their head up. Let me see if I can make that clear, and the lesson will be yours. Hebrews 11, chapter 1 begins this way. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. And this is what the ancients were commended for. The writer sets up the fact that I'm going to tell you some stories, but they all have this in common. All of these people had hope and confidence in what was ahead. And he begins to list them. Now this I've come to call the sizzle reel chapter of the book of Hebrews. My son is in videography. And at one point he told me that a buddy of his had got the best job in the world. And I said, what is it? He said he does sizzle reels now for sports events. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he'll be working for Fox Sports at a basketball game or at a football game. And he says he sits in the truck and he has the job of pulling down the best moments in the game every time there's going to be a commercial. So he'll watch a section of a game and he'll pull down, that was amazing. Oh, look at that catch. Oh, look at that shot. And he'll have those already, but he can only pick about 2.5 seconds worth of them. Now, you all have seen many sizzle reels. It's that moment right before the commercial. We're going to commercial, and then da-da-da-da-da-da, the music starts, and then you see that long bomb, or you see that guy get angry and get in the coach's face, or maybe you see a 3-point shot, or somebody block an amazing shot in basketball, and we always expect that whatever the most exciting thing was, they're going to give us again to it one more time. My son said, Dad, can you imagine that job? You sit there, and they say 15 seconds, and you have to decide which one. And then they say 10 seconds, and if something happens at 10 seconds, you've got to grab that and pull it down. Will you put 2 shots in? Will you put 1? What order? Where's the music go? 3, 2, 1, boom, you hit the button, it renders, and it's out on national TV live. I said, man, that sounds like a stomachache to me. He said, that sounds like my dream job, Dad. And I was reading my Bible and I realized that's what the Hebrew writer does in Hebrews chapter 11. He takes a whole game and boils it down to 1 verse. Here, take a look at a couple of them. The story of Noah takes several chapters in the book of Genesis, but here he says, by faith, can you read this line with me? By faith, Noah, when warned about in holy fear. Now, if you're going to do the sizzle reel for Noah, you have to have the ark in it, right? That's the moment. That's the three-point shot. That's his big deal. Or what about Abraham? You know, Abraham takes 13 chapters in the book of Genesis. A lot of ink spilled over Father Abraham. But here, just 3 verses. Here's the first one. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, say these words with me, obeyed, and even though he... You know, you could put that on the line for a lot of us right there. Do not know where we are going, especially if the battery goes out on your GPS when you're 5 minutes from the church. That's when you start meeting neighbors. Do you know where, right? Abraham didn't have a GPS. He just had God saying, trust me, follow me, leave your family and your kinsmen and go to a land that I will show you. And when the Hebrew writer said, what's the most important thing Abraham did? He said, that's it right there. One step at a time. Keep looking ahead. One step at a time. Keep looking ahead. But that's not the verse that captures it best for me. The verse that captures it best for me is the verse that takes more than 13 chapters in the book of Genesis and boils it down to one sentence. It is the story not of Abraham, nor of Isaac, nor of Jacob, but the story of the 11th son of Jacob. Now, some of the VBS graduates here are saying, wait a minute, hold it. Jacob had 12 sons. Which one was the 11th? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, and then comes Joseph and Benjamin, who was the youngest. Oh, Joseph was my mom's favorite flannel graph story to tell. Anybody here remember flannel graph? Do you know what I'm talking about? The kids are like, what is that? Your parents will explain it to you later. It's pre-PowerPoint, all right? Mom used to have this piece of board that was covered with blue felt, and she would put the figures on it as she would teach our Sunday morning Bible class. The figures had been cut out of felt, and they would kind of stick to the flannel, and so she'd put up Joseph. Now, the first story, of course, is Joseph, and he's wearing plain clothes. But then what does his father bring him? A coat of many colors. Do you know what's interesting is that the term for that coat in Hebrew is actually what's called a long coat. Now, a long coat, not just that the coat was long, but that the coat covered the bulk of his hand. Now, you say, why is that important? What does a farm boy need with a coat that will cover what he needs to work with? That's like a dad. Can you imagine a dad with 12 sons out on a farm? And they're all working out in the field. He comes out and says, boys, I got something. And he pulls out a tux. And he walks past the oldest and the second and the next and the next and gets almost down to the younger. Benjamin must have been thinking, ooh, it's me. But no, he stops right at Joseph because everybody knew Daddy loves Joseph. See, the first thing we learn about Joseph in the book of Genesis is that he was loved by his father, and how did his brothers feel about him? Yeah, about like you'd have felt about some younger brother who got all the attention and got given a coat that says, this boy really isn't meant to work. And to make it worse, he had those dreams. Remember the dreams? And then he was, I don't know, he had the temerity to come to breakfast and say, hey guys, I had another dream last night. And in this dream, you were all stars. And the brothers must have said, yeah, that's a good dream. And Daddy was the sun, and Mama was the moon. And then in my dream, all of you bowed down to me. That's just asking for a beatdown, isn't it? I mean, that is just poking the bear. And his brothers got so angry and so mad that at one point, what happened to him? Remember, they're out there in the field, and they get him, and they throw him in a pit, and they argue about who's going to kill him. And the Bible says in the book of Genesis that one of them said, no, we can't kill him. And this argument ensues, but a group of Ishmaelite traders come by, and they say, we'll get rid of him this way. Stripping the beautiful coat off of him, they sell him to the slave traders, who take him to Egypt, who sell him to Potiphar, the head of the prison. And before you know it, they're walking back to their dad with a coat that they dipped in, anybody remember what? Goat's blood, that's right. And they say, Dad, we're so sorry. He's
dead. So they break Jacob's heart and they get rid of the dreamer. Man, what a story. And we've only gotten started, right? He gets up there into the prison, and he's there mopping the floor in the prison when it seems God is with him, and everything he does well. And Potiphar says, I trust you. Here, let me put you over this part of the cell. Let me put you over this part of the prison. And soon he's managing the whole house for Potiphar. Wow. He is a young man who is away from his family, who has no idea he will ever see his family again. He is in a foreign land, but what does the boy do? One step at a time. One step at a time. Trying to keep his head up. Then he meets a woman. Potiphar's wife. Woman of power, woman of position. The Bible says she noticed that Joseph, she noticed that Joseph was handsome and well built. Now, I can see that many of the men in this church know that burden of having others notice that you're handsome. And, well, ladies, this is your chance. Just pat your hubby and say, baby, that's you now. But the problem was, this wasn't his wife. This was his boss's wife, a woman of power who says to him, hey, good looking, what you got cooking? And Joseph says, no way. Now think about this. He's probably 18, 19 years old at this point. And he says, no way, absolutely not. What integrity, what faith, what courage, absolute. And the Bible says she doesn't quit. She just keeps coming and keeps coming. And finally grabs him as if to say, come on, come to bed with me. Guys, can I be honest? If you're 18 or 19 years old, and a woman grabs you and tries to kiss you, I mean, at what point do you say, Lord, she had my coat? I mean, I've done my best, But what does Joseph do? Remember the story? Joseph leaves that coat right in. He literally slips out of the coat and runs out of the house. The problem is she's holding the coat up when her husband comes through the door at the end of the day and throws it down and says, guess what? Your servant tried to do to me. She accuses him of attempted rape, and Joseph is back in the prison, only now he's not mopping it. He is a prisoner. Wow. How do you condense the story I've told you down to one sentence, right? And we're not done yet, are we? Because in that prison cell, he meets a baker and a cupbearer who used to work for the head of Egypt, the Pharaoh. They both have dreams. Joseph interprets them and tells the baker, you're going to die. But he tells the cupbearer, you're going to go back to Pharaoh's service. And indeed he does. And as he walks out of the cell, Joseph says, remember me. And of course he doesn't. And Joseph languages there, just trying to do one step at a time what's right. But then Pharaoh wakes up and says, man, I had the weirdest dream last night. You remember this? Those of you who've read the story, you remember what he dreamt? There were 7 fat cows that came out of the Nile River. And then 7 lean cows came out of the Nile River. And the 7 lean cows ate the 7 fat cows, but they didn't gain any weight. I mean, Dan, that's the diet I'm looking for. All the beef you can eat, and no weight gain. And Pharaoh says, I have no idea what this means. And there were 7 fat ears of grain and 7 lean ears of grain. And all of a sudden the cupbearer says, I know somebody who can interpret dreams. And guess who he yanks up out of the depths of the prison cell and puts before the most powerful man of his day? Joseph. Can you interpret these dreams? And Joseph points to his God and says, my God can. And sure enough, he says, Pharaoh, the 7 fat cows represent 7 good years of crops. The 7 lean, skinny cows represent 7 bad years of famine. And during that time, the people will consume all of the grain from the good years and will die. You'll run out of food. Pharaoh says, well, we need to make plans for that, and you're the man to do it. And all of a sudden, Joseph is vaunted into the position the Scripture says that he was the second man in all of Egypt to the Pharaoh, as he made sure that Egypt did not starve. Wow. Now that's a story. And we're not done yet, right? Because he's standing there receiving people when who comes walking in with empty bags saying, down in Canaan we're starving. I wonder if we could get some grain from you. They look familiar. Who are they? His brother. Is this a moment? Is this a moment you would dream of? The guys who put it to you, the guys who messed up your life, the guys who did you wrong, come walking in. And what do they do when they end up in front of Joseph? They bow down just like that dream. You tell me what you'd do if you had your enemies bowed down before you and you had the power to say, throw them out. Oh, how about this? Throw them in prison. Throw them in the cell I was in. And then kill them. Now you say, well, why didn't they appeal to him and say, oh, brother, please? Because they didn't know it was their brother. He'd been more than a decade away from them, living in a foreign land. He spoke the land of the people. He probably dressed like the people, wore the makeup. Basically, he talked like an Egyptian and walked like an Egyptian. I mean, you know what I'm saying, right? So here he is, completely unrecognizable by his brothers, and yet he recognizes them because they look just like they did. And instead of doing what I would do, Lord, instead of taking vengeance, instead of saying, well, look what the cat... No. He feeds them. He cares for them. Okay, he yanked their chain a little bit with the cup and Benjamin, but by the time he got the whole family there, he says, brothers, it's me. They panic, and he says, no, what you intended for harm, God intended for good. Oh, by the way, in that moment, he saved you. You realize that, don't you? Remember his brothers' names? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Who would have starved in Canaan without the food Joseph provided? Oh, a young man named Judah, who was the great grandpa of the Savior of the world, Jesus Christ, the Lion of Judah. Isn't that amazing? You and I today have Jesus. Now somebody could say, well, God would have figured out, hey, God's God. He's going to take care of it. But I'm just telling you, this is where he put Joseph. He put Joseph in a place so that he could save the lineage of Christ. Wow. Now put that in one sentence. I dare you. Seriously, put that whole thing in one sentence. You're thinking, man, where is it? What does he say? Because the Hebrew writer does it. Here it is, verse 22. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions about his bones. That's it right there. Who was in the truck when that sizzle reel was put together is my question. Seriously. All these other ones make sense. Noah and the ark and Abraham and, and then sacrificing. And then you get to Joseph. What an awesome story. Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions about his bones. That's impressive. Well, when I read that, I thought, you know what? I've got to get the real story. So I went back to Genesis. If you want to, flip your Bibles over to the very last chapter of the book of Genesis, because that's where this comes from. This is a verse that encapsulates the last 3 paragraphs of the entire book of Genesis. Now, I'd read the Bible before, but I got to tell you, I'd read right by Hebrews 11:22, never thinking, wow, why is that so important? So here we go. Verse 22 says, Joseph stayed in Egypt along with his father's family, lived to be 110 years old, and saw the 3rd generation of Ephraim's children, and the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, that would be his son, were placed at birth on Joseph's knees. Now, stop and get this. He goes to Egypt when he's somewhere around between 15 and 18 years old. He lives to be 110. Now, let's just make it 20 to round things off. He's in Egypt at 20. How many years had he lived in Egypt by the time he died? Yeah, there's calculators on your phone if you need it there. So he's lived 90 years or more in Egypt. He's bouncing on his knee the great-great-grandchild, okay? So how many generations have now grown up in Egypt? Now think this through. He's 110, and here's what he says to them. Then Joseph said to his brothers, let's see, back up. Yeah, here we go. Then Joseph said to his brothers, this is out of, there we go. I'm about to die. Well, he's 110, so he probably said, I'm about to die. Think about this, 110 years old. But God will surely come to your aid and bring you out of this land to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then the Bible says, Joseph made the Israelites swear on oath and said, read his words with me, God will, no. When you say surely, that's a Hebrew word that means absolutely. It is marked in stone. Here we go. God will come to your aid, and then you carry my bones. What's that about? What's so amazing? Why is that the three-point shot? You ready? Here we go. Joseph is about to die. It is the thing we all fear most. He has run and run and run and run this marathon, one foot after another, over amazing times of faithfulness and difficulty. But as he is breathing in his last, what does he look around and see? Those kids who are up here. He sees the next generation. And what is his concern? That the next generation doesn't have their head up. They weren't looking where they were going. They were not remembering, God will, say it with me, surely come to your aid. What he tells them is, don't forget the promised land. And he does it in the most powerful way he can. He makes them swear. He says, I want to swear to me that you will not bury me here. Now, what is the little grandkid going to say? Grandpa, why not? I mean, this is home. This is all we've known. This is where my mommy grew up. This is where my mommy's mommy grew up. Where do you want us to bury you? And he calls that kid over and he says, now listen to me. Y'all aren't staying here. You're moving. And the grandchild says, when? And he says, baby, I don't know. But God will. Come on, God will come to you. But Grandpa, we've lived here a long, long time. Some of the older kids are like, just let him do it. Every year he's like, well, the promised land. I mean, when is Grandpa going to give up the promised land thing? When he first told me, I was like, oh, great, let's go. And he says, well, not today, maybe tomorrow, maybe tomorrow. Well, I grew up and I had kids. And then my kids' kids had kids, and God is nowhere to be seen. Are you letting this sink in? Does this feel familiar? Joseph said, don't you bury me here. Here's what I want you to do. Don't let them build some big pyramid of Joe, okay? Because as a Pharaoh's advisor, do you know there are pyramids in Egypt? I've been to Cairo, and the docent there said, these smaller pyramids. I said, whose are these little ones? He says, those are for the king's close advisors. There would have been a pyramid of Joe had he not said, don't you do that to me. Well, what do you want us to do? You put my bones, it's called in a sarcophagus. That means flesh eating. Sorry, but that's what it means. And you put the body in the sarcophagus until it is rotted away, and what's left then? Bones, which you can put in a little, if you were going to stay, you'd put them in an ossuary. But he says, I want you to put my bones in a rollerboard, all right? I want you to put my bones in a cart. Put them in a backpack. Why? Because they're not staying here. You're going to the promised land. When? I don't know, but God will. Come on, God will come to your aid and take you there. Oh, man, but what a reminder, right? Hey, Bobby, what's in the backpack? Oh, it's Grandpa. Why do you have him in a backpack? Because he says any day now, God is coming for his people. This is how my grandma used to do it. This world is not my home. I'm just a passing. Now hold up. My grandma sang that. Did your grandma sing that? And your grandma's grandma? And maybe your grandma's grandma? And here's my question. How will we make sure that those kids in the other room, and some young ones right in this room, never, ever forget God will surely come. Tell you, I believe what Joseph was saying to them was, look where you're going. Oh, it's a beautiful place to live, Simi Valley. As my wife and I were driving along here, we saw the hills and green. Man, isn't it wonderful to see the green, right? Look down over the valley. Man, what a beautiful place to be. Don't let this place fool you. God's got something even better waiting. This world is not my home. This is not as good as it gets. What exactly will it be like? I don't know. I've never seen a cherubim. Have you, Dan? I don't know what an archangel looks like. Somebody said, what's heaven going to be like? I don't know. Had a brother tell me heaven's going to be a worship service where we just sing and sing and sing and never get tired. I said, man, that'd be great. He said, yeah, no preaching. Just sing and sing and sing. I don't know what your picture of heaven is. The Bible says we'll be in the place we want to be with the one we want to be with. Amen. It'll be a place where there are no tears. It'll be a place where there are no regrets. We will finally be with God. Will it be a renewed and redeveloped and somehow remade, a new heaven and new earth? I don't know exactly how God's going to do it, but I tell you what, if Jesus is going to prepare a place, it's not going to be shabby. It is not going to be second rate. Are we telling the next generation? More than that. Joseph didn't just tell them, he demonstrated it by saying, I know I'm dying, but that doesn't mean God's not faithful. I saw a woman walk into a post at the Chicago airport. Big post. I mean, I couldn't get my arms around it. Metal wrapped around it, one of those that they've decorated in this corridor in the airport. She was a businesswoman, dressed up to the nines, pulling along this little rollerboard and texting as she walked. Just giving it one of these. And I promise, I shouldn't laugh, but it was funny. She, had on the heels and the whole bit, and she was just moving right along, and boom, she hit that with her head. And bong, this kind of metal thing gong, and everybody looked up. And some thought, oh my goodness, we better rush her, because she began to do like this and grab her head. But in just a split second, she got it together and said, who put that there? And then walked right on around it. I know if you're like me, right here can I get a oh yeah? Right here can distract you. Whether it's the text or the message or the mortgage or whether it's the x-ray, or whether it's the newspaper, or whether it's the divorce papers, or whether it's the coroner's notice. It's easy to focus right there, isn't it? It's easy to get drawn down into the here and now. Joseph says, you're not going to be what you need to be in the here and now if you don't have your eyes on the then and there. You can't serve Simi Valley like you need to in the here and now if you are not aware that God will be faithful in the then and there. If you don't have your heads up, how in the world am I going to notice the needs of the world, because I'm here making sure I got mine? Brothers and sisters, just one more step. That's what Joseph calls on us to do. And to share that with the next generation faithfully. Will you bow with me? Father, thank you for Joseph's story. Thank you for words of encouragement. And thank you, Father, for a promise that Paul told us, that you would have a house waiting when this tent here folds up. A building from you, an eternal house in heaven, not built with human hands. God, we long for that. And like Joseph, we don't know when it's coming. But Father, may we keep our heads up as we take one step at a time. Lord, first I pray for folks in here who are just trying to take one more step with their marriages. One more step of faithfulness. Or Father, one more step of integrity as a single in a world that says everybody's doing it. Father, will you give the singles of this church the courage to take one more step? Father, will you give the seniors of this church the courage to be faithful as Joseph did and take one more step, ever pointing towards home. Father, I pray for those who are here who may be wrestling and may even today feel like I've given up. I've sat down in the race. I've gotten out of the marathon. Father, maybe today, maybe this moment and this worship and this simple text is what you got them here to hear, that they might get up and take one more step. And Father, some may even need to take a step today of responding when the invitation song is sung, of stepping out and saying, I need to begin again. I need to get back in the race. Or I'm so tired and worn out, I need my brothers and sisters to help me take another step. Or Father, there may be some here who said, I've never gotten in this race. I've never given my heart and life to Jesus and been baptized in His name. Father, maybe when we sing this song, they may need to step out. Or after service, they may need to find Dan or one of the other leaders here and say, Can you talk to me about this baptism thing? I want to give my life to Jesus. But Lord, I believe that the vast majority of us gathered together here have already taken that first step. It's that next one that challenges us, Father. For each of us, there is a next right step. God, will you give us the courage to do that? And as we do that, to grab the hand of this generation behind us and say with Joseph, surely the Lord will be faithful, and He will take us to a land He's promised one day. And come, Lord Jesus, and then we won't have to worry about anything. We won't have to miss those that are gone, and we won't have to fight the battles of today. But if you choose not to come today, Jesus, will you make us more like you tomorrow than we were today, and send us out into this world with our heads up, taking one more step and pointing all we know towards you as we serve with all we have. And I pray this in Jesus' holy name, and all that agree say, amen. Let's stand together. We're going to sing a closing song. If there is a need in your heart, it may be that you'd say, I want to talk to somebody right now. Well, this front row is open. But it may be that you'd say, I'd like to talk to somebody afterwards. I tell you what, there's people all around you that would love to tell you that Jesus is Lord and what it means in their life. So whether you need to step out, and there's a danger after a sermon like this, I kind of go home feeling guilty or gross. Don't do that. Go home feeling great. And if that means coming and saying, I need prayers and I need to begin again, then this opportunity is here for you. Maybe the question is the next step you need to take maybe just to come today and say, I need to begin again? If that's the case, then your moment is yours. While we sing, if you're in need, won't you come?
For thou, O Lord, art high above all the earth. Thou art exalted far above all gods. For thou, O Lord, art high above all the earth. Thou art exalted far above all gods. I exalt thee. I exalt thee. I exalt thee. O Lord, I exalt thee. I exalt